What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY and the overall market. I'm also going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar approaching tomorrow, which you should be watching for in terms of our technicals. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. So offer ends very soon in just 2 weeks. So check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So looking at Tesla, I just want to say that Tesla has this resistance at this 230 area that's very tough, not to mention the 235 zone. And right now, it's looking like Tesla is turning a little bit in the downwards direction. Now, we're just barely holding our 20 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. If Tesla were to lose that, we're going to be looking for a little bit of a dip tomorrow before it tries to get bought back up. So watch and see how this ends up developing. So I want to talk more about this in just a few minutes. But looking at some data, just notes that tomorrow it's going to be Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. 15 minutes before the market opens, we have some data coming out. So we have the industrial and manufacturing production numbers. These are going to be very important, might cause some volatility for the markets. So get ready for that in the morning. After that, we just have Logan from the Fed giving a speech. Then we have a bill and bond auction, and everything else is more minor. So it's nothing too crazy. So that being said, that's what I'm seeing, at least for the markets. It's all very, very minor data. However, the market's getting ready for something very, very big, and that is FOMC on Wednesday. The Fed is going to be making some very, very big announcements of what they're doing with interest rates. They're going to be giving us a cut, but the question is to what extent. And they're also going to give us their interest rate projections. That's also going to be very important, not to mention what Jerome Powell says. So there's a lot of big stuff coming out for Wednesday. One thing that's very interesting is the market is shifting its view. So now the market thinks there's a 67% chance we get a 50 basis point cut and a 33% chance we get a 25 basis point cut. The market's now leaning in the direction of us getting an even more dovish Fed. We'll see if that ends up being the case. So now what happens is we'll be watching to see what this looks like going into the FOMC meeting. Okay. If by Wednesday, if this remains even more elevated and the market's expecting 50 basis points and the Fed gives us 25 instead, that's not going to be the best of news. The market could actually dip because of that news if we get 25 basis points. But it also depends on what Jerome Powell says. So if Jerome Powell gives a speech and he starts talking about how the Fed has to enter a new cycle where they're easing, so not just one cut, but more like there's just going to be a whole cycle and they're entering a state of quantitative easing, the market could like that and there's still hope for it. If Jerome Powell is more ambiguous and they just give us 25 basis points, that's going to be a little bearish. And then if we get 25 basis points and the Fed is more optimistic and more like they have a more dovish tone, that could be, so a little bit more bullish. And then lastly, if we do get that 50 basis point cuts, I do anticipate the market will have a lot more upside coming. So I know there's a lot of different like contingencies I'm going over, but just so you guys know, that's how things are looking in my opinion. So with that being said, what do I see for the market as well? Something else that's worth noting before I start talking about Tesla news is that the market is neutral. There are some buyers and sellers simultaneously stepping in. We saw tech kind of look a little bit weaker than the S&P 500 today. Some tech stocks did slow down, but for the most part, the market is still holding up quite well at support. So tech is what's looking a little bit weaker as we're seeing a little bit of a rotation. We're seeing some money moving away from tech and into like other sectors. But overall, we're still holding up. It's not like it's a massive sell-off or anything like that. But the S&P 500 is outperforming the Nasdaq right now, so we're starting to see that shift. So right now, the S&P 500 is at grade. We're approaching all-time highs. We could be looking for that very, very soon on SPY, but then we'll see how we end up reacting. And the puts and call option ratio is still at fear. So this was extremely fearful. People were shorting the market really hard as we saw the put and call ratio going up for the 5-day average and started dipping because of the fact that a lot of people started closing their shorts. And then what's happening is that's what's driving the market higher. The VIX is also neutral, kind of stuck in the middle, so we're waiting for that. So anyways, what's happening now? There was some good news that came out yesterday for Tesla about how they produced their 100 millionth battery cell. So the 4680 cells are pivotal for Tesla's growth and their future, and their capabilities at producing more and more of these at scale is going to be a very bullish catalyst for the long term. This was a good piece of news, but it came out yesterday. And a more immediate piece of news was this. So the market did kind of sell off together, and that's part of why Tesla dipped. And also, there's some news coming out about how Tesla's supercharger expansion is slowing down, especially after the layoffs. So, what happened was when you look at reductions, we are looking at basically a shift that's happening since May up until like August, our overall supercharged reports that have been opening, they're down about 28% compared to last year. So that's because ever since we got the layoffs by Tesla back in April, we're seeing a slowdown in the amount of supercharger reports that are opening up. So that's something very, very important. There's huge demand for these. So hopefully Tesla does get back up to scale as time goes on, but that is what's making some headlines for the time being. Besides that, I didn't see anything else that was too crazy on the news. What else do I see? Elon Musk did mention that the right hand drive for the Cybertruck is not expected to come out for a while, so there's no short term plans for that yet. And besides that, the market did also sell off, partly thanks to Apple, so that did play a role in why we sold off in the morning before getting bought back up for some tickers. Tesla did not get bought back up enough; it's still close in the red. Apple had their iPhone sales, and they weren't that good for the iPhone 16. So this is like the pre-sale. They're actually down a little bit over 12% compared to what we saw last year. So a decline in iPhone sales led to a big sell-off in Apple. That's part of why the market also sold off. So what's happening to Tesla now? Here's my answer. We're looking at resistance at this 228 area and 230. 230 is a very, very tough resistance. So every time we've hit that for the last 4 days, we've been rejecting. And then our supports to watch for is going to be around this 225 area. If that does not hold us, I see us dipping to 222, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not. But for now, I do see a little bit of downside potential for Tesla. We're looking a little bit weaker here, and we'll see if 226.5 to 225 holds. 225 might break, so be very, very careful. In my opinion, there's kind of like a head and shoulders like structure. Tesla looks a little bit weaker, so generally when you have a pattern like this with the wick and then the rejection, we do come down to test the wick again. So usually that is what happens. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla ends up kind of like dipping a little bit to retest 225. Look for a little bit more downside. It could even lose that and come closer to 222 before it tries to rebound. But then I think Tesla will trade sideways after that. So look for a little bit of a dip and then some sideways price action is the most likely case. And I say that despite the fact that SPY has more potential. So SPY is outperforming. So what happened to SPY is we dipped as well as we predicted, but then it got bought back up again. So I think it might try to fill this imbalance. It might try to push close to all-time highs and consolidate. So SPY might push a little higher. The market may try to push tomorrow then consolidate. I find that to be very, very probable looking at technicals. If we lose 560, we're looking for 558. If we break past 563, we're looking for the all-time high to be tested or very close to it. But just know between 563 and 565, SPY has rejected almost every single time. So I think what's going to happen is we kind of dip in the morning, then start pushing higher. We could try to get back up to this 563 to 565 area, then start to consolidate, and then we could be making a move back down. So I think that's what SPY is going to most likely do. See a lot of range bound price action, a dip and a push closer to all time highs, and then move back down, and a lot of consolidation right before FOMC. ES looks a little bit more bullish. I think there's potential for us to try to push. We're looking at this 5650 area as our key zone, not to mention the areas above. So I think that we might be looking for a push on ES tomorrow, but then we might consolidate after that. So I'll be watching that very carefully. For Nvidia, we're barely holding 114 as key support. I called out the exact level in my morning video about how it might test the EMAs and try to rebound. So we got that correct to a T. Now it's just barely holding this key support. So we're looking at 114 as key support. Our resistance is going to be around 118 to 120. So I think what could be happening is Nvidia dips lower for 114, then it tries to rebound, and we just trade sideways within this range for just some time. So look for a little bit of a dip to 114, then a bounce, and some sideways price action for Nvidia. That's what I find to be the more and more probable. There is an inverse head and shoulders forming on Nvidia, though, by the way, but there's no sign of the bounce yet, so we will see if that holds. I think we might just consolidate for now, and we'll see if we get a bounce thanks to FOMC or not. Sometimes these could be traps, so be open minded. The dollar is kind of rejecting here, could be dipping. Not the dollar, sorry. Bitcoin is what's rejecting. Bitcoin looks a little bit weak here. It might consolidate, retest 58, 340, so 58,340. If that breaks, we're looking for a move closer to the 59,000 area. If it doesn't break, we could be dipping. We look kind of bearish right now, so it might kind of consolidate and tip a little bit lower. We have an imbalance to fill down here, so be very careful. For others out there, we have NQ. And Q is kind of consolidating right here. We will see if we can try to break out above these levels higher. I think that between 19,600 and 19,700, there's some tough resistance. So it is possible we push a little higher before we start dipping back down. So be very open minded to that. I wouldn't turn too bullish quite yet. I'd be very patient if I were you. For the QQQ we're trying to push in the after hour, so it looks a little bit more like it wants to rebound. We do have an inverse head and shoulders. I think there could be a test of 475 again if that breaks. We're looking for 478. But then once we hit those resistance levels, we could be dipping back down towards the low 470s, back down to 470 for some consolidations. Look for a push for 475, move back down to some consolidation after that. For Apple's dipping right now. We're looking for 215 as our key support. We have resistance around 218. We're stuck in the middle, but there is some downside potential, so give it the time it needs. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're also trading sideways as well. I think we're just range bound between 215 and 218. So I think we're just going to be stuck for the time being in this range, just trading sideways, going back and forth and back and forth. That's all I'm saying for now. Nothing too crazy. For Palantir, looks a little bit more bullish. As long as we hold above 36, we're looking for a retest of 36.5 or higher. So it still looks bullish. Looks like it wants to go higher. If we lose 35, we will be dipping, but there's no sign of that yet. We still favor upside. For Supermicro, in my opinion, we pushed all the way up to about the 460 area. I did call that out yesterday before I tried to reject. So look at 453 as resistance and support 441. We're kind of stuck in the middle, going back and forth and back and forth. We kind of pushed and dipped. It looks to me like it might be dipping for 441 tomorrow. We'll see if it bounces. So look for some downside. For Rivian, I see some downside. I think we're going to be testing 13 and we'll see if we bounce off that. So look for a little bit of a dip to 13 and we'll see how it goes. For so far, we're pushing a little bit higher. We'll see if we hold above 8. If that does hold, we're looking for a big push for 8.25. If we end up rejecting, we could be dipping, but I think there's more upside potential for the 8s. For AMD is just range bound right now. We have 152 as our resistance and 150 is our support. I think we're just going to trade sideways in our range for the time being. If we end up losing 150, though, there could be a bigger dip towards 148. But otherwise, I'm just seeing some sideways price action on AMD. ARM is going to be testing 137.8. If we bounce off that, we're looking for 142 to be retested. If we lose 137.8, we're looking for a dip all the way down towards at least 134 or lower. So watch and see how we end up going. For Coinbase, we're just trading sideways. We have kind of like a head and shoulders like structure. If we end up losing 161, we're looking for a dip back down towards the 156 area. If we bounce, we're looking for a push up towards 164. So we have kind of like a head and shoulders. There's some downside potential coming right over here. And I am seeing momentum slowing, so we'll give this the time it needs if 160 ends up breaking. For Amazon, we look a little bit more bearish, but I see a test of 183.5 coming tomorrow, maybe during the pre-market. If we hold above that, we're looking for a pushback up towards 186 or higher. If we lose 183.5, we're looking for a dump back down to 180. So that's going to be a very, very key support. We'll be testing a little bit of a dip tomorrow. We'll be testing support at the dip, and we'll see if we bounce or not. For Meta, we look a little bit more bullish. We're looking for a big push right now. So it got a nice close. It has potential to push all the way up to about 537. We'll see how it reacts. So that's what I find to be more favorable. For Microsoft, we look more bullish. We're looking for 434. If that breaks, we're looking for a big test for 435 to 437. If we lose 430, we're looking for a dip back down to 428. It looks more bullish to me nonetheless. Google looks more bullish. We're looking for 160's resistance. We'll see if that breaks or not. I think it might be testing this and then consolidate. So we'll see how it goes. Four more guys. We have DJT looking kind of bearish. I think this imbalance will fill and we will be dipping to 16.6. The VIX is looking like it's kind of rejecting here. We have a gap to fill, so we'll see if this dips as the S&P 500 tries to push. But be careful, guys, because the big move is going to be determined by FOMC. Same thing with the 10-year Treasury yield. This will be determined by what the Fed does with rates. So we're waiting for this. And then finally, the last thing we're waiting for is essentially what's going on with the dollar. The dollar is just kind of flat right now. It lost support at 101, so this is showing some weakness, but it is approaching the next support at 100.5. We're going to be watching to see if it bounces off this. It's still indecisive, so we're just waiting to see. So my view of the market is that the market is going to continue to trade sideways within a range. We could try to rebound some tickers like the S&P 500 tomorrow, but Tesla's looking kind of weak. So look for a dip, and we'll see if it bounces off our supports that I called out or not. So watch supply and demand and just know there's some downside potential for the short term for Tesla. But then whether we get a big bounce or not depends on what we end up getting from the Fed and Jerome Powell. So get ready for all of that. With that being said, thank you all so much for listening. Get ready for some data coming out for tomorrow. I'll talk about that in my video for tomorrow. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you guys very soon. Take care. Have a good day, night, or evening, and we'll see how things end up developing. All right. So thank you and peace out.